All right. Welcome to Compassionate Choices, Oregon's annual fundraiser, everyone. I'm KJ Lewis, the Oregon Access and Truth and Treatment Manager, and I'll be leading the new Dementia program at Compassionate Choices. I'm excited to be working on the new Dementia pilot in Oregon. Our CEO, Kim Callanan, will tell you a little bit more about the Dementia program in a few minutes. I would really like to thank you all for coming, and I'd like to specifically recognize, stand up if I call your group, our generous sponsors, our event captains, our event committee, and event volunteers. Can you all stand up? Thank you so much for all you give Compassionate Choices. I also want to let everyone know that all contributions this evening will be matched by an anonymous donor, so don't be afraid to give generously. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Matt Whitaker, event committee member, who will be presenting the Volunteer of the Year award. And here comes Matt. Please welcome him.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here tonight. As was said, tonight it is my honor and my privilege to introduce our Volunteer of the Year. I first met our Volunteer of the Year, Pam Wald, in the Oregonian. Pam had volunteered to tell her story to reporters and to all of us. And I was touched by just how authentic, compassionate, and heart-centric her story was as she told how she supported her husband through his decision to use the Oregon Death with Dignity Act. I subsequently got to know Pam on an individual basis as a friend as she led our Corvallis outreach team. Pam was always willing to tell her story to anyone who needed to hear it. I remember one such occasion. Pam was staffing a booth at a college gerontology fair. And I walked in this conference and there were all these people vying for the attention of a room full of hundreds of people from the age 18 to 24. And they had flashy gimmicks, and they had free pins and backpacks and anything else that they hoped would bring people to their booth. But the crowd was around Pam's table. So I went up to see what it was that she was giving away. And I noticed that on her table was a simple sign that she had made with poster board. And the sign said, "What brings you joy?" And there were college students gathered all around with colored pencils, and they were writing down things like spending time with my family, doing sports, cooking meals with friends. And then Pam was asking, now think about those things that you enjoy, and think about what matters most. And now try to imagine how that might change if you were facing some type of serious illness. And she was introducing all of those people to the idea of quality of life and of learning what it meant to exercise your values through all different stages of life. By the end of it, when Pam eventually was giving a keynote address, all of those college students were her number one cheerleaders in the room as they watched her tell her story. And I have remained one of Pam's biggest cheerleaders as I've watched her tell her story. So it is my honor to recognize someone who is a gift to this movement, but even more so, a gift to the world, Pam Wald.
Let me give you a hug. Thanks so much. Hello? Okay. If I put it, can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. I move my hands a lot. I talk with my hands kind of thing. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. I'll hold it.
I'll hold it. I gotcha.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matt. Volunteering with Compassion and Choices has brought a lot of joy and meaning to my life and has nurtured my spirits, especially having the opportunity to meet, there's Governor Roberts, meet such kind and compassionate people and have a chance to work with them. Back in 2012, I helped my husband navigate through the barriers, many of the barriers, so he could have his choice respected to die with dignity. We were able to navigate those barriers, and Ben had a peaceful death, and I was able to give him my last gift of love. But a few months after Ben died, I started hearing stories from a lot of people where their loved ones were not able to navigate those barriers, and they did not have a peaceful death. And that touched me because I said to myself, anybody going through the process that I just went through needs loving assistance, period. So I decided that I wanted to get involved and try to help reduce some of those barriers. Now, as Matt knows, and he's been in the trenches for a long time too, we can get discouraged with some of the barriers that still exist. But I draw inspiration from the story, the journey of a man named Richard. And I'd like to share a little bit of his story with you. Okay, back in 2008, my daughter and I would go to the library, and we would encounter Richard, who was clearly suffering from the effects of homelessness. My daughter on one occasion said to me, and we knew his name because the librarian used it a few times, and my daughter remembered it. She said, Richard needs some help. And I said, Bonnie, you're right, he does need some help. So one day we were leaving the library, and Richard was standing out in front of the library. The police had been called, and this is true. He was yelling out, I'm sick, I need some help. My daughter became extremely upset, and I tried to console her, and I said, Richard's going to get some help, Bonnie. See the police over there? Now, fast forward 7 years. My girlfriend and I are walking down a street in Corvallis, and we see this gentleman walking about 30 feet ahead of us, stooping down, picking up something. And as we got closer to him, we realized he's picking up cigarette butts. And so as we passed him, we said, thanks for doing that. And he looked up at me, and I was surprised as heck. It was Richard. Richard was clean-shaven. He'd had a haircut. He was wearing clean clothes and had a big smile on his face. And he told us, my doctor said to me that I got to walk every day. So as I'm walking along, I noticed cigarette butts on the ground. And he says, I used to drop my butts all the time. So at least I can pick them up now. So my girlfriend and I thanked him, and we watched him go up the road, the path, and we noticed every 30 feet he reached down and picked up some butt with his right hand, and then he started picking up litter with his left hand. And he was a tall man, but he had to bend down a lot. So now fast forward 1 week later, my girlfriend is sitting in a community roundtable discussion in the city of Corvallis, trying to get people who have been just at one another's throats over the siting of a men's winter shelter in Corvallis downtown. It was decided we bring in a mediator so people could kind of like try to find some common ground. Well, my girlfriend sat at the table with Richard, and Richard offered a number of really valuable suggestions on how people can work together. I've not forgotten that story. And the words that Richard says stick in my brain. At least I can. The other words that stick in my brain, and Matt will appreciate this because he loves music. Bill Staines, the singer-songwriter, in one of his songs writes this, you take the little that you know, you do the best you can, and you trust the rest for the quiet faith in man. I want to thank Compassion Choices. I do not like volunteers of anything awards. And I agreed to come up here and speak because every single one of you in this room is a volunteer. but I want to thank Compassion Choices for allowing me to volunteer and do the little bit that I can. Thank you very much.
And now it continues to be my pleasure to introduce to the stage someone who has worked across countless venues to help many people who are in need, from children who need insurance and health care to now focusing her efforts on the end of life. Our Compassionate Choices Chief Executive Officer, Kim Callanan.
Thank you, Matt. It is really wonderful to be here tonight in Oregon among so many of the pioneers in this movement, including our colleagues at End of Life Choices Oregon. In just 10 days, we will be celebrating the 21st anniversary of the Oregon Death with Dignity Act. Let's give yourselves a round of applause. We have made tremendous progress in the last 2 decades, and we have made unprecedented progress in the last several years. With the authorization of Hawaii, that became the 4th jurisdiction to authorize medical aid in dying in just a 4-year period. It took a 20-year time span to authorize the previous 4 states. That is tremendous progress. Thank you all. While our pace for progress has accelerated, it has emboldened our opponents. They are really angry at us, and we feel it every single day. They come at us with legislation, litigation, subpoenas, regulatory roadblocks, and each and every time we are able to defeat them because of your support. Despite the highly polarized and partisan environment that we are in, I remain incredibly optimistic about the future of the end-of-life choice movement. We receive widespread support. It doesn't matter what political party you're from. It doesn't matter what religion you're from. People want choice and autonomy at the end of life. As the baby boomers retire and they begin to take care of their aging parents and they contemplate their own mortality, our support will only grow. Our support will grow because we are on the right side of history, public policy, popular opinion, and humanity. To capitalize on our momentum, the Compassionate Choices Board of Directors adopted a brand new strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, we put forth a bold objective that within 10 years, half the population in this country would have access to medical aid in dying. Now notice the really important word that I said, which is access. It is not enough to pass a law. People should be able to access that law from their own doctor in their own health system. People should not have to reestablish care during the most vulnerable period in their life. We must remain and ensure that people are able to access the law. Now, medical aid in dying is just a start. What we have seen through the implementation of medical aid in dying is that we are creating a transformation within the healthcare system where the patient is becoming the ultimate decider in their end-of-life care. And we see this transformation as being similar to the kind of change that you saw in the childbirth movement. When my mother delivered me 50 years ago, she had absolutely no say in what her childbirth experience looked like. She was rushed to the hospital. Medication was thrusted upon her. She was strapped down to a bed, and my father was relegated to the waiting room. 30 years later, when I delivered my son, I had an option. I wrote an 8-page birth plan. 8 pages. My medical team honored that birth plan. I had limited interventions. My husband was by my side each and every moment. That transformation that took place within the childbirth movement is the kind of transformation that we in this room are creating around end-of-life choice and care. Imagine, and it's not that far in the future, there will be a time when doctors come to you and say, how would you like to die? And you are going to be able to have that option. Now, medical aid in dying is only the start, though. When the board adopted our new strategic plan, they took on one of the most difficult challenges that we are facing within end-of-life choice and care, and that is the issue of dementia. When I first experienced the issue with dementia, it was about 25 years ago, and it was with my grandmother. My grandmother was a woman who loved children. Not a moment went by where she did not remind me that she was waiting for me to make her a grandmother. The time finally came with the birth of my son in about 2000, in the year 2000. Unfortunately, by the time he was born, my grandmother already was in advanced stages of dementia. And I very naively thought that somehow seeing her new grandson was going to snap her out of the trance. And so I came to visit her, and I brought her grandson, and I put him on her arms, and there was nothing. She laid there motionless. She didn't move. She didn't recognize me. She didn't recognize my mother. She didn't recognize her husband of 50 years. I was naive then. I somehow thought that I could bring that memory back. The reality was, several more years went by, and we showed my grandmother love by doing exactly what the vast majority of people do. We treated any illness she got. She got pneumonia, we gave her antibiotics. She ended up getting surgery at one point. That's what love was in our mind. In that moment, that was when I started to contemplate quality of life and the certainty of death. We didn't realize that we were extending my grandmother's life, that we were prolonging her death. We were just caught up on the conveyor belt of automatic health care. That was what people did. Unfortunately, in 20 years, not much has changed. The propensity to treat is so strong that 9 out of 10 people with advanced dementia get some form of an invasive medical treatment in the last month of their life. 9 out of 10 people. We are not just refusing to let people with dementia die, we are doing everything possible to keep them alive. And this is counter to what the vast majority of people say they want. A survey that was done in JAMA showed that the vast majority of people see living with advanced dementia as a fate worse than death. But right now, the conveyor belt of medical treatment puts you in a place where you really have no other options. It doesn't have to be this way. And that's why Compassion and Choices is getting ready to launch our new dementia initiative. Through our dementia initiative, we are going to help to honor people's wishes if they document them in advance so that they're able to choose to forego treatment or to voluntarily stop eating and drinking. Now, this is people's legal rights right now. We don't need to change the law. People are legally allowed to do this right now. But it is not recognized within medical system. It is hard to find doctors that will support you to do that. And what ultimately happens to the vast majority of people when they try is they're made to feel as if somehow this is elder abuse. When really what it is it's showing your love by honoring and respecting the person's values and priorities. I'm now going to turn it over to the video, and we're going to hear from one of our wonderful, wonderful board members, Jerry Lee Shaw. She has her own personal experience with dementia, and she was so inspired to see us take on this issue that she gave a very generous seed grant to be able to fund the start of this program. And she's going to talk a little bit about the tools that we'll be releasing later this year, or later next year.
One aspect of the Compassion and Choices dementia tools that I highly value is that it helps the person with dementia and the family in the early stages and the later stages. In the early stage of dementia, when a person has their full mental capabilities, they're able to tell you, and you can document through the tools, their wishes, their choices, what they want and don't want. Too often we focus on the family or the caregiver, but this is really giving control and authority to the person with dementia. I have seen the difference this makes with our family member who has dementia, and when we started working through the dementia proxy and some of the other tools that are coming available, it was so powerful to watch that person's confidence and spirit toward the future change. We went from despair to hope. The toolkit also gives you a way to manage the later stages where it gets a bit more complicated. It is so often in the later stages of dementia, people receive medical treatment they did not want. A surgery, a DNR is ignored, and the tools allow the person who is the healthcare proxy, who has the legal authority, and the family to honor the wishes of the person with dementia and to make sure that those are carried out the way the person wants.
Now, those tools will be developed early next year, but we all know that tools are not enough. Tools are just the first step in empowering somebody to be able to get care that's consistent with their values and priorities. But we ultimately need to change the entire way medicine thinks about end-of-life care and treating people with dementia. And that is going to take integrating our new dementia program into the Access campaign and getting doctors and health systems and hospices to fully recognize and appreciate people's legal rights. 6 million people live with dementia right now. Absent a miracle cure, that number will grow to 15 million people by 2060. It is time we establish a new cultural norm around dying with dementia, where loving somebody means honoring their values and priorities that they have documented in advance. Given Oregon's role as the pioneers in this movement, I can think of no better place to launch this program than right here. Speaking of pioneers in the movement, I am now very excited to share that our own Barbara Coombs-Lee is almost done with her next book. Her book is called Finish Strong, and the book is all about empowering people to chart their own end-of-life journey. She has taken her decades of experience in working both as a nurse and a physician's assistant and then as an advocate, and she has put it into a beautiful book. And for any of you who know Barbara, you know that she has a way with words. It is 300 pages that you will not want to put down because it leaves you feeling as if you can have the kind of empowered end-of-life experience that you want. When I read the book, I immediately thought to myself, This book has the potential to transform end-of-life choice and care the way our bodies ourselves transformed the women's health movement. Now, we have the power in this room to help make that happen. The book is going to be launched on January 8th. So you can take your calendars out. I will not be upset that you're looking at your phones, and mark January 8th and block the day out so that you can read the book. It is worth it, I promise you. And then after you've blocked the day out so that you can read the book, think about who else do you want to make sure that reads the book. Share information on Facebook, send it to your friends, buy it as presents, host a book club where you can talk about it. It's a great tool for you to talk to your relatives and your family members about the kind of care that you want. And it's a great tool that the more people that we get this tool into the hands of, the increased likelihood that we have that we will establish end-of-life choice as a basic and fundamental civil right. Finally, I wanted to recognize one last amazing person, and that is Carol Bradfield. Carol Bradfield was a volunteer in Portland, and some of you probably know her. And she very generously gave her time to us while she was alive. We were just the recipients of a very, very generous gift from her. And so I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize that very generous legacy gift that she gave to us. Through her gift, we now have some funding to be able to jumpstart our new strategic plan. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh no, Carol gave the gift and now I don't have to, and I really wanted to contribute. But it's really okay, because our strategic plan is going to cost just a couple of dollars for us to implement. So there is plenty of time for any of you who wants to be able to give an additional gift. And of course, if you'd like to recognize us the way that Carol did with a legacy gift, we certainly welcome that as well. In closing, I just want to thank you all for being here. This is a movement that has come about, every bit of our progress has come about as a result of your incredible contributions, both monetarily as well as the support that you've given through your time and energy. And with your continued support, that progress will continue. So thank you very much for everything that you've done. In just a moment, I'm going to call Frank up on the stage, but I did want to take a moment to just acknowledge the Compassion and Choices staff as a group who've really worked hard to put this together, and to take a moment to thank Susan Pryor, who's really... And with that is my tremendous pleasure to introduce to you Frank Moss. Frank, yes, let's get Frank. Frank doesn't really need an introduction because all of you know him and he's tremendous. But we are so fortunate to have Frank as the chair. He is just a force of nature. And come on up and let's hear more from Frank. Thank you.
In case you are not sure where we are in the program, this is the Ask. You didn't think you'd get out of here with nothing, did you? I hope that you all have one of these in front of you, and we'll talk about it more later, but I wanted to particularly call your attention to the last page of this thing, which has a description of the dementia program that we're about to unleash, and I think unleash is a good word for that. So please look at that as we talk, because it may be more interesting than I am. When Betsy and I moved to Portland in 2010, as soon as we unpacked our last box, we signed up for Compassion and Choices. It was, in addition to our kids, one of the main reasons why we came to Oregon, because you have Compassion and Choices. And Betsy became a client volunteer, and I joined the advisory committee, and we've been involved ever since. And the funny thing in those early days of our involvement was that we used to say that Compassion and Choices was the best kept secret in all of Oregon. It didn't get a lot of publicity, I think by design. It was not like they were doing things out there in a way that people could react or have some kind of reaction to. They just quietly did spectacular work. But all of that changed in 2014 because of one person. And I think that's important to recognize, that it only takes one person. And that person was Brittany Menard. Many of you may remember her. She was a stunningly beautiful 29-year-old woman who had very advanced and very virulent brain cancer. And she and her husband were in a position to move up to Oregon so that she could access the death with dignity law here, because they didn't have anything then in California. And that created a sea change, I think, in the whole subject and in Compassion and Choices. Brittany was on the front page of People magazine. She got publicity like I don't think Compassion and Choices had ever gotten. And so on October 7th, 2014, when I was in this same building, standing in this same place, doing the Ask back then, you could sense the amount of excitement and electricity there was in the room. Because I think all of us recognized at some level that after Brittany, Compassion and Choices would never be the same. And I think that's proved to be the case. After Brittany, we watched with great excitement as California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Vermont, and Hawaii all approved the law. And I think we can give ourselves a lot of congratulations for the work that's already been accomplished. But what's very clear, what is crystal clear, is that we are not done. There's a sense in which we are just beginning. And the wonderful Dementia initiative that is starting right here in Oregon is an example of the things that remain not yet done, things that are critically important. As a clergy person, I've spent 45 years dealing with people who had dementia. And one of the things that was so tragic about it was that I and the family members of the person with dementia would walk with them in their journey as the person that we knew and loved essentially disappeared. They were no longer the same person. And a lot of times the end of their life was a tragic and horrible thing to watch and to be part of. We experienced this personally when Betsy's mother, who lived in a retirement community in Connecticut, developed dementia. And we watched as the person that we knew slowly disappeared. And she sank into a silence from which she could not escape and which we could not access. She finally got to the point where she could not speak and she could not recognize any of us, particularly Betsy, who was the best daughter ever in terms of going to see her. But somehow there was a spark in the middle of my mother-in-law which never went out. And she reached the decision on a particular day that it was time to stop. And she locked her mouth shut, and she would not take a single bite of food or a single drop of liquids, despite the best efforts of the staff at the retirement community where she lived. And about less than 2 weeks later, she had died. And I have to say that that retirement community and its staff were incredibly supportive of what it was that clearly my mother-in-law wanted. And after that experience, Betsy and I realized that her parents had given us a great gift. They had moved into a retirement community where all their needs would be taken care of and that they could move seamlessly through the different steps of aging. We were so impressed by that that Betsy and I now live in a retirement community in Eugene as our gift to our kids. The fact that our daughter-in-law is a gourmet cook and she invites us off regularly is an added benefit. But I have to say that I think we are at another moment of electricity in the room and excitement, because we have wonderful new things to do. This Dementia initiative can be life transforming because, as Kim said, there are 6 million people already, and as we age, that number is going to get bigger and bigger, who have dementia and who cannot access the present death with dignity law. It is up to us, I think, to make that happen, to do the work and to support the things that will enable compassionate choices to continue to be advocates for death with dignity in every state, and to be sure that everyone who wants to be part of death with dignity can do that. And so now, get out your paperwork. You will find in there an envelope, and if your memory's like mine, you need to do it now rather than taking it home. And we invite you to give as generously as you possibly can for an organization that I think you all know spends your money really well. So please do it now. Thank you.